The Dominion fleet moved like a swarm of silver predators across the emptiness, their engines leaving faint ripples in the dark. In the flagship's command chamber, Admiral Valen lounged in his seat with the casual posture of someone who had forgotten what danger felt like. The war against humans had become nothing more than routine harvest, tedious even. Another colony to burn, another pocket of resistance to crush. His lieutenants worked their stations with mechanical indifference, eyes glazed with the boredom of veterans who had stopped distinguishing one slaughter from the next. The human colony below was small, its cities more like scattered outposts than anything resembling a proper civilization. They had fortified their bunkers, erected shield arrays that glowed faintly against the Dominion bombardments, but the defense was little more than spectacle. Valen tapped a clawed finger against the railing of his command chair, staring at the glowing planet as one might a puzzle with a missing piece. "Persistent little vermin, aren't they?" he remarked, not to anyone in particular. His voice carried the effortless disdain of a predator lecturing prey. "They resist, they fall, they resist again," is almost admirable in a pitiful way. The bridge crew chuckled lightly, following his lead. Subordinates always laughed when the admiral made mockery of humans. It was tradition now, part of the ritual of conquest. Below, the human defenses fought with a desperation that was familiar. They fired missiles that could not breach Dominion shields, scrambled fighter craft that might as well have been toys. One lieutenant reported a minor hull breach on a frigate, the result of a human strike. Valen merely smirked. Let them believe they drew blood. Hope tastes sweetest just before it rots. In truth, what unsettled him was not the resistance, but the monotony. For decades, the humans had been an annoyance, loud, stubborn, endlessly inventive, but never dangerous. They built colonies like insects building hives, always scattered, never threatening the structure of the galaxy itself. And yet, something about their refusal to disappear nagged at him. They were supposed to break. Empires had broken faster than this. The planet cracked open under the Dominion's fire. Explosions blossomed across the surface, rivers of flame carving across night. Valen leaned forward, eyes catching the flare of one final defensive stronghold falling. It should have satisfied him. Instead, the unease deepened. "Report," he said. "Resistance neutralized, Admiral. Casualties minimal." He nodded absently, gaze drifting. "Minimal," he repeated, as though the word itself were dull. The silence stretched. Then another officer spoke up, injecting new life into the stagnant rhythm. "Admiral, our scouts have intercepted intelligence on a previously uncharted system. High-energy readings, possible human colony. It appears they've been concealing resources there." The bridge awoke from its stupor. New prey, new territory. Valen sat upright, claws tapping against the armrest with sudden interest. A hidden nest. He allowed himself a sharp grin. At last, something resembling initiative from these insects. The officer transferred data to the holoscreen. A sphere rotated slowly, blue and green, wrapped in white clouds. Old star maps labeled it only with a forgotten glyph. "Humans call it Earth," the officer continued. "Reports suggest it may be their origin world. Its defenses are unremarkable. Outdated satellites, primitive surface-to-space weaponry. Hardly worth a fleet engagement." Valen stared at the image. Earth. The word rolled strangely on his tongue. To find the birthplace of a species should have been a moment of historical weight, yet the Dominion treated it as another target. Origin world, you say? That explains their stubbornness. Roots make creatures cling harder before the soil is torn from them. His grin widened. What better way to break them than to burn the place they crawl from? A ripple of amusement spread across the chamber. Officers exchanged smirks, already anticipating another effortless conquest. One muttered, a moth pretending to be a star. Another laughed. Valen lifted a hand for silence. Prepare the fleet. Set course for Earth. The order hung in the air, electric final. In the hours that followed, preparations were made with efficient detachment. Ship corridors hummed with the low thrum of engines awakening for warp. Soldiers checked weapons with mechanical rhythm, veterans of too many campaigns to feel the thrill of anticipation. Only Valen lingered by the viewport, watching the void stretch before them. He thought of the humans again, their resistance, their history of small victories that never amounted to more than delays. It should have reassured him that Earth would fall like the others, yet a sliver of doubt gnawed at him. He remembered one battle years ago when a human frigate, battered and aflame, had rammed into a Dominion cruiser rather than surrender. The image had never left him. Wreckage, fire, the desperate choice of a people who refused to die quietly. He shook it off, whispering to himself, this is their final ember. Nothing more. The fleet emerged from warp near the Sol system. Instantly, scanners lit with faint anomalies. Faint, but not threatening, so the officers reported. Valen studied the readings himself. There was silence in the system, an eerie quiet. No human fleet rushed to meet them, no frantic distress calls. Just silence, as though Earth waited. He chuckled, masking unease with sarcasm. Perhaps they've already given up. How considerate. The Dominion ships slid into attack formation, massive shadows eclipsing starlight as they moved closer. Earth grew on the main screen, verdant, ocean-wrapped, deceptively peaceful. Valen leaned back in his chair, claws steepled. If this is their stronghold, I almost feel insulted, he said, earning another ripple of dutiful laughter from the crew. Yet beneath his words, a tension hung unspoken. Something about the stillness, the deliberate quiet, unsettled him. He dismissed it with the arrogance drilled into every Dominion officer. Nothing could truly threaten them. And still, he watched Earth swell in the viewport, and for the first time in years, the boredom cracked. Not from excitement, but from the faint echo of something he refused to name. It felt uncomfortably like dread. The fleet pressed forward, the final commands given, as silence stretched like a blade waiting to strike. The first salvo came not from the Dominion, but from Earth itself. A lattice of satellites that had seemed inert and half-derelict came alive with sudden purpose, beams of concentrated energy slicing across the void. One of the Dominion's destroyers disintegrated in a flash of brilliance before anyone had time to register it had been targeted. Alarms howled through the fleet. On the flagship's bridge, Valen's smirk froze. What was that? He barked, though the answer was already before his eyes. Earth's orbit was not unguarded, it was a web. Satellites shifted in synchronized arcs, platforms that had masqueraded as relics of a primitive age revealing themselves as weapons designed with clinical precision. The Dominion retaliated instantly. Dozens of cruisers fired, raining plasma volleys down toward the planet. Yet the shots never struck atmosphere. Invisible barriers pulsed to life, bending the fire aside as if the sky itself rejected their assault. Defense grids unfolded, vast shield arcs powered by reactors buried beneath continents. Earth had not been defenseless. Earth had been waiting. A voice broke through the Dominion's comm channels, not in the shrill panic of prey, but in a tone calm enough to chill. It was male, deliberate, measured, as though reciting a practiced truth. This is Earth. You should not have come here. The silence that followed was heavier than any explosion. Even the Dominion officers, trained to sneer at enemy broadcasts, felt it, an unsettling weight in the human's composure. Valen narrowed his eyes, forcing out a scoff. Psychological tactics. Let them choke on their arrogance. Yet something in him twisted at the memory of that voice. It had not pleaded. It had not threatened. It had simply warned. The battle escalated. Dominion squadrons surged forward, but each push was met with uncanny precision. Human weapons did not roar indiscriminately. They struck as if guided by unseen hands. A frigate vanished. Its core imploded before it could fire. A battleship lost engine control, crippled without so much as a visible shot. No wasted effort, no flailing chaos. Just cold, efficient dismantling. Valen gripped his armrest, claws gouging into the alloy. His crew shouted readings, half believing the instruments were broken. These were not the humans they had known, scrambling with mismatched weapons and desperate tactics. This was a force sculpted by patience, sharpened by silence. Reports streamed in. Human colonies that had fallen so easily, so theatrically, had they been bait? Patterns emerged like cracks in glass. Too much resistance at the edges, too much weakness displayed. It had been a performance, a deliberate mask. The realization settled over Valen with suffocating clarity. The Dominion had not been fighting humans at their best. They had been fighting decoys. He stood, voice slicing through the din. They lured us here. Every defeat we gave them, every colony we burned, it was all calculation. His officers hesitated. None wanted to give voice to what their eyes already screamed. Humanity had not been hiding out a weakness. They had been preparing. Then another broadcast, crisp and controlled. A human commander this time, her voice steady as steel. You misunderstand us. We do not wish for war, but you forced it, and we have learned from history. Her words struck Valen harder than any weapon. Learned from history. He remembered glimpses of human archives, fragmented files captured from colonies, wars fought across their own planet with brutal intensity. Entire continents scarred, populations driven to ashes, yet they endured. No other species warred like that with itself and survived. If those lessons had been harnessed, refined, weaponized across centuries of hiding. He turned sharply, pull back the fleet, regroup beyond the system. Now. But the order came too late. Human ships emerged from wormholes that rippled open like wounds in space. Sleek, angular vessels glided into formation, each move precise, coordinated, like the strokes of an invisible hand across a chessboard. They were not numerous compared to the Dominion Armada, yet each carried an aura of inevitability, as if they already knew where the battle would end. Valen's second-in-command whispered, voice raw with disbelief. Their numbers are nothing, and yet we are the ones cornered. Silence, Valen snapped, though his own throat felt tight. He could not let fear fracture command, not here. Not when his officers looked to him for certainty. He drew himself taller, forced a sneer back onto his face. They fight with illusions. Find the weakness. There's always a weakness. But every strike they attempted fell apart. Their weapons missed targets that shifted with uncanny foresight. Their formations collapsed under attacks that exploited invisible vulnerabilities. It was as though the humans had studied every Dominion maneuver and designed answers for each one. And perhaps they had. A chilling thought flickered through Valen's mind. Had humanity built its entire resurgence on the Dominion's arrogance? Every raid, every massacre, every time they thought humans had been beaten, was it all part of some vast lesson? A mirror turned against the predator? He refused to voice it. To admit it would unravel everything. Yet the truth coiled tight inside him, undeniable. The battle thinned around them. Dominion ships limped, shattered, some already fleeing, in broken lines. Earth did not chase. Earth did not rage. Humanity simply watched, patient, confident, certain. The bridge had grown too quiet. Officers exchanged glances, unease spreading faster than any order could contain. Valen felt their doubt pressing against him like a tide. If he faltered now, panic would break them entirely. He steadied himself, though his chest burned with dread. "We will not retreat from insects," he said, forcing venom into the word. "We will not." Yet even as he spoke, he could not escape the image of Earth, growing larger in the viewport. Not desperate, not broken, not begging for survival, but calm. Waiting. The humans had turned silence into a weapon, patience into a trap, history into steel. And for the first time in his long career, Admiral Valen wondered whether the Dominion had already lost. The calm crackled one last time, cutting through his thoughts. That same calm male voice spoke, unhurried. "Leave now, or we will end this." The bridge froze. Valen's chest tightened. They had thought themselves the predators. But predators did not receive warnings like prey. Predators did not feel their blood run cold at a whisper from the hunted. The choice hung before him, more dangerous than any weapon. Withdraw and admit weakness, or stay and discover what Earth had truly hidden all this time. The Admiral's silence stretched long, heavy as lead, and in that stillness the fate of empires trembled. Admiral Valen stared at the recording again, though he had watched it more times than he could count. The flicker of old Earth battles, grainy footage captured from their own archives, played out across the holoscreen. He watched tanks crawl through mud, watched cities turn to firestorms under bombers, watched ragged soldiers drag themselves through trenches and refuse to break. He watched mushroom clouds bloom with a quiet horror, the scale of destruction beyond anything the Dominion had ever inflicted on itself. His crew shifted uncomfortably in the shadows of the command chamber, glancing at one another but never at him. What unsettled them most wasn't the brutality, but the relentlessness. Humanity had not simply survived these wars, they had emerged sharper, harder, more united. No species civilized enough for space travel should have endured such self-inflicted scars, yet here they were, wielding those lessons against an empire that had thought them broken. Valen's claws tapped against the table, his expression unreadable. At last he said, "This is not a race that fears destruction. They have danced with it too long." His voice was quieter than usual, not barked with arrogance, but drawn tight with the weight of realization. The bridge fell into a silence more suffocating than any battle. Behind him, his second-in-command finally spoke, hesitant. "Admiral, perhaps we should return to the Council. Present what we've seen." Valen turned sharply, eyes hard. "Present what?" That we underestimated vermin? That we, the Dominion, feared prey? He spat the words like venom, yet the bitterness was aimed at himself as much as anyone. He paced, the silence stretching, then growled, "The Council will not listen. They never do." But the thought lingered, gnawing. He had to try. When the Dominion Council convened days later, the chamber glittered with the arrogance of empire. Dozens of high commanders and political lords gathered, their robes woven with metals mined from 100 enslaved worlds. They treated the summons as routine, another debate over taxation or resource allocation. Valen's entrance carried little weight in their eyes. He was a soldier, nothing more. He projected the recordings without preamble. The chamber filled with images of Earth's defenses, their ships moving with surgical precision, their calm broadcasts that felt more like judgments than threats. Murmurs rose, disbelief shading into irritation. When the old human war footage followed, the nuclear firestorms, the endless trenches, an uncomfortable hush descended. Finally, one of the counselors sneered. Theatrics. A scavenger species brandishing history as a weapon. Impressive in presentation, Admiral, but hardly the doom you seem to believe. Valen's jaw tightened. He had expected resistance, but the ease with which they dismissed the evidence burned. You are fools if you think this is posturing. They were never weak. Every colony they let us burn was part of a design. Every defeat was bait. And now, they strike with weapons tailored to dismantle us. Laughter rippled through the chamber, sharp and cruel. You give them too much credit. They are insects who learned how to sting. You would have us tremble because they mastered illusions. Valen slammed a claw against the table, the sound reverberating through the hall. The laughter cut short. His voice dropped into a growl, every syllable deliberate. They are not insects. They are predators who learn patience. And we walked willingly into their jaws. The chamber erupted, half in outrage, half in unease. Some shouted for his removal, others demanded more evidence. A few remained silent, their eyes narrowing, as though weighing possibilities they had never dared consider. But the Chancellor rose, silencing the tumult with a gesture. The Dominion has ruled the stars for centuries, the Chancellor said, his voice smooth, cold. No upstart species will undo that. We will crush them as we have crushed countless others. Fear is unbecoming of an Admiral, Valen. Perhaps you have spent too long staring at shadows. The dismissal stung more than open scorn. Valen bowed stiffly, concealing the rage boiling beneath his calm. They would not listen. They never did until the fire licked their own robes. He left the chamber with a heavy stride, the murmur of arguments echoing behind him. Back aboard his flagship, the tension had spread like a contagion. Soldiers whispered in corridors, passing rumors that Earth was not simply another world, but something more. Stories grew with every telling, of ships vanishing before firing a shot, of weapons that silenced fleets without killing a soul, of human commanders who spoke like executioners offering mercy. Fear had rooted itself where arrogance once flourished. His second-in-command met him in the war room. The men no longer speak of victory. They speak of survival. Some, he hesitated, then continued, they say Earth has been waiting for centuries. That this is not the beginning of war, but the end of one they already won. Valen's chest tightened. He had thought the same, but refused to give it voice. To do so would mean admitting the Dominion was already broken. He turned away, his gaze fixed on the stars. Rumors make cowards of soldiers. Remind them who we are. But his own words rang hollow. He could not erase the image of Earth's calm message, the unwavering tone that carried no desperation, no triumph, only inevitability. Later, alone in his quarters, he replayed the human broadcast once more. The voice echoed, patient and unshaken, "You should not have come here." He closed his eyes, and for the first time in his long career, he allowed himself to wonder if survival meant obedience rather than conquest. The next day, orders came from the Council. The Dominion would gather its strength, launch a full-scale offensive, and erase Earth from existence. They laughed at the reports of human power, called them exaggerations of a nervous admiral. The attack was scheduled. Valen stood at the viewport, watching his fleet prepare for what he knew would not be a battle, but a reckoning. His officers moved with dutiful precision. Though their eyes betrayed the fear, they would not speak. He saw in them the same doubt that haunted him, the same realization clawing at his mind, that perhaps this war had never belonged to them. He whispered to himself, so low no one else could hear, "We have awakened something that cannot be put back to sleep." The fleet engines roared to life, thousands of ships aligning for the strike. The stars beyond seemed colder, sharper, as though watching with judgment. Valen kept his face hard, his voice steady, as he gave the order to advance. But deep within, he knew. The Dominion was not marching toward victory. It was marching toward its trial. The silence of Earth still echoed in his thoughts, louder than any battle cry. The Dominion fleet advanced with the inevitability of a storm, stretching across the void in ranks so vast they seemed to swallow the stars. Engines glowed like an artificial constellation, thousands of ships surging toward a single blue world below. On the flagship's bridge, Admiral Valen stood rigid, his jaw set though the weight of dread pressed against every bone. His officers moved quickly, repeating orders, recalibrating weapons, their voices clipped and brittle. They masked their unease in protocol, but Valen saw through them. He saw it in their eyes, the question they dared not voice. What if Earth truly cannot be broken? The order from the Council had been absolute, annihilation. The Dominion would not retreat, would not admit weakness. Yet, as the first waves descended, the void itself seemed to bend against them. Space rippled, and wormholes flared open without warning. Human fleets emerged not in scattered numbers, but in perfectly calculated arcs, each arrival severing Dominion formations before they could fully align. The first clash was instantaneous. A Dominion battleship lunged forward, its plasma cannons spitting fire, but its shots scattered harmlessly across an invisible barrier. In return, 3 human frigates slid between its escorts and carved through its engines with precision strikes. The warship spun helplessly, venting flames into the black, not destroyed but neutralized, removed like a piece from a game board. On the bridge, one of Valen's lieutenants gasped, "They're not fighting for glory. They're dismantling us." Valen clenched his fists, forcing his voice steady. "Hold formation. Overwhelm them by mass. They cannot answer to endless force." But mass was meaningless against foresight. Every time the Dominion pressed, the humans were already there. Their ships danced between volleys, wormholes opening like trapdoors beneath advancing squadrons, cutting supply lines with surgical cruelty. It was not the chaos of war, but the choreography of inevitability, as if humanity had written this battle long before it began. Valen's chest burned with the unbearable truth. He had warned them, and the Council had not listened. Now his fleet was paying for arrogance carved into the bones of their empire. A calm voice broke through the Dominion comms once more, the same voice that had haunted his thoughts since orbit. "We told you. You should not have come." The words fell like a hammer on his crew. Fear rippled through them, silent, undeniable. It was not merely the firepower they faced, but the composure, the certainty. The humans spoke not as combatants, but as executioners offering one final chance. Ships around them disintegrated in silence, consumed by precise strikes that left no time for screams. Squadrons attempted to retreat, only to find wormholes cutting them off, herded like prey into invisible nets. Valen could hear the rising panic in the scattered transmissions of captains begging for orders, for escape, for anything that might pierce the noose tightening around them. He gave no answer because he had none. Still, pride refused to yield entirely. He stepped forward, voice iron though his stomach churned. "We are Dominion. We will not beg." The second-in-command turned to him, trembling but defiant. "Admiral, this isn't war. It's judgment." Outside, the collapse accelerated. The Dominion's vast numbers dwindled into wreckage fields, drifting carcasses of what had once been an empire's pride. And through it all, Earth remained unscarred, its blue and green surface shining below, shielded and serene, untouched by the fury around it. The climax came not in an explosion, but in silence. Human vessels spread in perfect formation, surrounding the flagship. Every system on board flickered dead, shields, weapons, engines, all severed in an instant as if the ship itself had been humbled into surrender. Valen gripped the railing, breath heavy, staring into the screen that now showed only human ships waiting in silence. A new voice spoke then, softer than the first, female, calm and deliberate. "Admiral Valen, the Dominion has fallen. Your choices are simple: surrender or watch what remains of your fleet vanish into ash." His crew stared at him, their faces pale with expectation, fear, hope. He felt the weight of centuries of Dominion arrogance pressing on him, the demand to resist even when resistance was folly. Yet he also saw the futility, the brilliance of the humans who had hidden in plain sight, sharpening their claws beneath masks of weakness. He remembered the council's laughter, their sneers, their blindness. And he realized this moment was no longer about the Dominion. It was about survival, about admitting the truth no one else had dared to face. He exhaled slowly, a sound that was closer to surrender than any word. "If I yield," he asked, voice low, "what becomes of us?" The reply was immediate, unshaken. "You live, but under a new order. Humanity does not seek revenge. We seek stability. Rule with us, or fade with the ashes of your empire." His claws curled into his palms. Pride screamed for defiance, yet pride had brought them here to this ruin. He looked at his crew, soldiers who had followed him through endless campaigns, who now stood on the brink of annihilation. He owed them more than pride. At last he bowed his head. "Then I yield." The human fleet did not cheer, did not fire, did not mock. They simply stood in silence, as if this had always been the outcome. One by one, Dominion ships powered down, surrender spreading like a final wave across the void. Valen sank back into his chair, exhausted, feeling the weight of centuries of arrogance crumbling around him. He had thought humanity fragile, but fragility had been their mask. Beneath it lay patience, resilience, and ferocity honed sharper than any blade. He looked once more at the blue world, filling his viewport. It shone not as prey, but as the center of a new order, a power that would no longer hide. He whispered, almost in reverence, "We never understood you." The voice on the comm answered quietly, carrying the weight of finality. "No, but now you will." In that moment, Valen understood that history had shifted. The Dominion was finished, not in flames, but in silence. Humanity had emerged, and the galaxy would never return to what it had been. And deep within him, past the ashes of defeat, a sliver of reluctant awe took root. For perhaps this was not merely an end, but the beginning of something the stars themselves would remember.